July 7th is Global Forgiveness Day, and joining us now to chat about the benefits of forgiveness is author of The Rules of Estrangement, Dr. Joshua Coleman. Dr. Coleman, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me here.
Let's talk a little bit about your book. Give me an overall view.
Sure. Well, I wrote the book because I see so many parents these days whose adult children have stopped talking to them. And these are parents in enormous pain, and they don't know what to do. Often they don't understand why. So I think talking about how to help adult children forgive their parents, I think parents have to take the lead on that. And they take the lead by making amends, and that's what's challenging.
Yeah, it's not always so easy for people to make amends when you feel like somebody has wronged you. So we're going to dive into some tips on what people can do. Where should they start?
Well, particularly if you're a parent talking to an adult child, you have to start by taking responsibility. So if the adult child says, oh, you hurt me, you traumatized me, you neglected me, so many parents feel like, I didn't, I gave you a great childhood. And that's the wrong place to start. You have to start by finding the kernel, if not the bushel, of truth. You have to assume that your child is telling you something really important about them. And what's hard about that for parents is most parents feel like they did the best that they could, and they probably did do the best that they could, but so they feel really guilty if their child tells them that. But nothing's going to happen until the parent takes responsibility. So the other part that's hard is to how bad it makes the parent feel about themselves, or anybody. You know, we want to make the people that we care about feel cared about. So when we hear that we let them down, we hurt them, it's really painful for us, particularly if we're somebody, say, who grew up with trauma ourselves and who carry feelings of self-criticism a lot. We're really hard on ourselves. So it can be really hard to do that deep dive and say, I'm sorry. But I think a good model is the AA 4-step, which says people should take a fearless and searching moral inventory in themselves in terms of looking at their character flaws and accepting them. Because what stays in the dark grows in the dark. The things that we can't really accept about ourselves are the things that make us feel worse. So acknowledging the ways that we're flawed can be really therapeutic, not only for us, but for the relationship with anybody that we care about.
Yeah, okay, so taking responsibility, just really listening to what your child, or anyone, this can be between friends.
Exactly.
What they've said, how you've hurt them. So taking that just at face value and kind of owning that and accepting that. Okay, what else can people do?
Well, don't get into the right or the wrong of it. Assume that if somebody's saying that you hurt them, accept that there is probably a good reason for it, and don't try to disprove it. Don't defend, don't explain, take responsibility. I think that that's hugely important. I think some people worry that it's going to be used against them. Kind of like, oh, well, now even you're admitting that you did this horrible thing or said this horrible thing. So, but typically that doesn't happen. Most people know that it takes a strong person to say that they're sorry. So when you say you're sorry, I think that invites much more compassion from the other person. You know, what I tell parents in particular is it's about humility. It's not about humiliation. It's about showing your vulnerability, because that invites much more receptivity from the other person.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. I think that the big thing to kind of realize here is there's a lot of hurt, and so there's so many emotions and just different thoughts, and you know, like you said, when you really have to just first listen and understand that there's hurt here, and then where can we go? How do we repair it? How do you start to repair once you kind of got all of that out there? Then what do you do?
I mean, I don't usually think it helps to ask for forgiveness. I think people are either going to forgive or they're not going to. So I think showing vulnerability is really the most important part, because when you show vulnerability, it invites vulnerability from the other person. If you show defensiveness, if you show anger, if you show irritability, it just makes the other person feel defensive too. So I think really being open, being willing to accept criticism, being willing to accept the other person's perspective, even if it's greatly at odds with yours, I think those are the most important principles.
Yeah, very important. Well, National Forgiveness Day is July 7th. Why is it so important for people to forgive?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can't forgive unless you've really figured out that you didn't deserve to be treated by how you did. So I'm never in a rush to tell somebody to forgive. But there are benefits. You can feel much more relaxed. It's less stressful. It doesn't feel good to carry a grudge. It can feel kind of toxic to your own psychology to feel like chronically angry and upset and ruminate. So it's just better for us to be able to not carry that load around with us.
One more question in regards to this. What do you think the first step? I'm sure that there's probably a lot of families, even just like I said, between friends, there are people who need to forgive in some way. What is the first step that people can take?
To forgive another person, I think, is to see that we're all flawed and that people are doing the best that they can. And we all make mistakes, and we all make mistakes in relationships, particularly with people that we care about. So learning that people do the best that they can, and you know, to work on showing compassion and empathy. And those feelings actually feel a lot better than judgment and criticism and anger.
Yeah, once you kind of take responsibility, I think the other big part is really just putting yourself in the other person's shoes to understand.
Right.
Well, Dr. Coleman, where can people pick up a copy of your book?
They should be able to pick it up at most bookstores and from my website. So there's, pretty much everywhere.
What's your website?
www.drjoshuacoleman.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining and sharing a little bit more about this. I know a lot of people can benefit from this.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yes, of course.